Story 1. It was a weekend trip to Portland. Nothing dramatic, just a quick getaway. The kind of trip where you book a place last minute, toss some clothes in a bag, and don't think too hard about any of it. The listing looked clean, bright photos, warm reviews, cozy little place in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing that made me hesitate, not even for a second. I arrived around 9 p.m. The street was calm, not eerie calm, just that end of day kind of quiet, where porch lights are on and curtains are drawn and everyone's already settled in for the night. The host had set up self-check-in, key in a lockbox, door code on the app, standard stuff. I let myself in, did the usual walkthrough, living room, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. Everything looked exactly like the photos. Clean floors, neatly made bed. The kind of place where you immediately exhale because everything is fine and you are right not to worry. And then I saw it, the smoke detector. It was mounted directly above the bed, which, fine, that's normal. But something about it felt slightly off, like it wasn't sitting flush against the ceiling, like someone had installed it at a small angle and just left it that way. I stood there for a moment, staring up at it. Then I told myself I was tired, that I was imagining things, and I moved on. But that little thought, that quiet, nagging feeling, it didn't go away. I got ready for bed, brushed my teeth, turned off most of the lights, lay down, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a faint reflection, coming from inside the smoke detector. At first I figured it was just a car passing outside, headlights catching something metallic, but the reflection didn't move. It stayed perfectly still, fixed in one small spot, like something was sitting behind a surface, waiting. And the longer I looked at it, the less it looked like a reflection. It looked like a lens. My chest tightened, because all at once, everything I'd brushed off came flooding back. The angle, the placement, directly above the bed, facing downward. Who does that? Who installs a smoke detector at an angle directly over where someone sleeps? I sat up slowly, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it straight at the detector. And for just a split second, I saw it, a tiny glint of glass, something behind the cover, something that shouldn't have been there. My hands were already shaking a little as I dragged a chair over and climbed up. I told myself maybe it was nothing, maybe I'd open it up and feel ridiculous, but I had to know. I twisted the cover off, and inside, wired carefully into the casing, was a small device, compact, hidden, lens facing directly downward, facing the bed. I stepped down slow, set it on the dresser, just stood there, staring at it, trying to let my brain catch up to what my eyes were telling me. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some weird accident. Someone had put this here, deliberately, carefully, and that meant someone had been watching this room, watching this bed, maybe for a long time. That thought hit different than I expected. It wasn't just fear, it was something colder, the kind of feeling that moves through you slow, like your whole body is just processing. But what came next was worse. My phone buzzed, a message from the host. Everything okay in there? I just stared at the screen. I hadn't texted them. I hadn't called. I hadn't done a single thing to make them reach out. So why would they ask that? Unless they already knew something was happening. A second message came through before I could even think. You seem a little restless. I stopped breathing, because there was no explanation for that. No innocent reason. No way they should have known anything about what I was doing in that room, unless they could see me, right now, in real time. I looked back at the detector on the dresser, then slowly, deliberately, around the whole room, the corners, the vents, the picture frames, every object that could hide something small. My brain doing that awful mental math. If there was one, how many more? I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed my bag, didn't fold anything, didn't turn anything off, didn't look back. I just walked straight to the door and out into the night air. When I got to my car, I was still moving fast, still telling myself just get in, just drive, and then my phone buzzed again. Another message. Most people don't even notice that one. I read it 3 times, and then a final message came through. Good thing you didn't stay longer. I sat in that car for a long time, hands on the wheel, not driving anywhere, just sitting with what I'd just read, trying to decide if it was real. It was real. I reported everything the next morning, filed a formal complaint, sent screenshots, but by the time anyone looked into it, the listing was gone. No profile, no host account, no record of the booking at all. Like it had been wiped, like none of it had ever existed. And I know I should feel relieved. I got out. I found it. I didn't just sleep through the whole night without knowing. But here's the thing that still stays with me. Late at night, when everything gets quiet, that message said most people don't notice that one. That one. Not the only one. That one. And I've never fully shaken what that implies, because if that was just one of them, I have no idea what I missed. Story 2. I thought it was just the Wi-Fi. That's what I kept telling myself, just the Wi-Fi. But by the time I figured out what was actually happening, I was already being watched. And the worst part, I don't think it ever stopped. It started during a short stay in Austin, a small modern apartment, listed as a private unit, smart home setup, keyless entry, everything controlled through apps, lights, thermostat, even the TV. On paper, it was exactly the kind of place that makes travel feel effortless. Clean lines, minimal furniture, a design that felt almost too intentional, not lived in, staged, like someone had arranged every object with a specific purpose in mind. But I shook that off. That's just how rentals look these days. I walked through the rooms, bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, everything clean, everything organized. I set my bag down and connected to the Wi-Fi without even thinking about it. That's just what you do. But then I noticed the name, not something generic like guest Wi-Fi or home network, something more specific, something that felt personal, like it wasn't meant for rotating guests, like it was set up for someone who was already there. I hesitated, then I connected anyway. At first, nothing felt off. I scrolled, checked messages, settled in, normal stuff. And then the TV turned on, by itself. No sound. Just the screen glowing in the dark corner of the room. And me, standing there, staring at it, waiting for an explanation that didn't come. I told myself it was just a glitch. Smart TVs do that. I picked up the remote and turned it off. Simple. Done. Then it turned on again, this time with sound. Low, faint, like static, trying to shape itself into something recognizable. That's when I felt it, that shift, the moment a room stops feeling like a room and starts feeling like something else entirely. I muted it fast and stood there, trying to breathe normally, running through every logical explanation I could think of. Maybe the host was testing a firmware update. Maybe there was a scheduler I didn't know about, technical stuff, reasonable stuff. But then a thought cut through all of it. If someone was controlling this remotely, they could see it too. I grabbed my phone and opened the Wi-Fi settings. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. I just needed to look at something. And that's when I saw it. Another device on the network. No name, just a string of characters, active and sending data. At the same time I stared at it for longer than I should have. That's when the lights flickered. Once. Then again, not like a power issue, not random, controlled, deliberate, almost like a response to me noticing. I stood up slowly, scanning every corner of that room, suddenly very aware of every object, every surface, every place something small could be hidden. And then my phone buzzed, a message from the host, everything working okay. I hadn't messaged them, hadn't called, hadn't complained about anything. So why, right now? I typed back, yeah, all good, sent it. The reply came almost instantly. You seem a little distracted. My stomach dropped. That's not a normal response. That's not something a host says to a guest they can't see. I looked around the room again, slower this time, more carefully. And that's when I noticed something I had completely missed before. The layout, the angle of the couch, the direction of the chair, the position of everything in that room pointed inward toward one central spot where I had been sitting the entire time. I moved to the kitchen, trying to break the feeling, trying to convince myself I was reading too much into it. But even there, things felt wrong. I picked up a glass, set it down, and a few seconds later, I heard a faint click from somewhere above me, like something adjusting. I looked up, nothing obvious, but I knew I had heard it. I walked back into the living room, and that's when I saw it, a small device near the ceiling, blending almost perfectly into the design. I stepped closer, squinting, and the details came into focus. A lens, small, subtle, pointed directly at where I had been sitting all evening. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain, because now there was no doubt, no logic, no maybe it's just a glitch. I stepped back slowly, my mind running through everything at once, the Wi-Fi, the TV, the messages, the layout, all of it pointing at the same thing. And then my phone buzzed again. You're not supposed to notice that so quickly. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I grabbed my bag, moving faster now, less controlled, heading straight for the door. But before I reached it, everything went dark. All the lights off at once. Complete silence. For a moment I couldn't see anything. And then the TV turned on again. Not static this time. A live feed from inside the apartment. I could see the room from above, from that device near the ceiling. And in the feed, I saw myself standing there, frozen, looking at the screen. But there was something else behind me. In the feed, a shape, not fully visible, not clearly defined, but there, just outside the camera's main focus, standing behind me. I turned around immediately. Nothing. Empty room. I looked back at the screen. Still there. I stopped trying to understand. I opened the door and left. I didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't wait for the elevator. I got in my car and drove without a destination, just away. Later I checked everything. The listing was gone. The messages were gone. The host account no longer available. Like the whole thing had been scrubbed, like it had never existed. But here's the part I still can't explain. When I checked my phone that night, the device was still connected, not to the apartment, to me, still active, still running, still sending data from somewhere I couldn't identify. And sometimes, late at night, when my screen lights up for no reason, I don't check it right away, because part of me already knows. It's not a notification, it's just something, making sure I'm still there. Story 3. Most smart devices just listen when you tell them to. But what happens when one keeps listening after you've stopped talking? What happens when it starts talking back in your voice? I've stayed in a lot of places, hotels, rentals, couches, all of it. But nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever rattled me the way that condo in Salt Lake City did. And the worst part, I almost talked myself out of being scared. Almost. The listing called it fully automated, which honestly sounded great at the time. Lights, thermostat, blinds, all voice controlled. The kind of place that feels like the future. Clean lines, modern furniture, that specific kind of quiet that only new buildings have. I remember thinking it felt ready, not empty like most rentals do when you first walk in. Ready, like it had already been expecting someone. The device was sitting right there on the kitchen counter. Small white speaker, soft ring of light glowing around the base. Totally normal. I'd used one of these 100 times before, so I didn't even think twice about it. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and just tested it out. Said the usual, turn on the lights. The lights came on immediately, smooth, quiet, exactly what you'd expect. No issues, no weirdness, just a speaker doing its job. And then I walked toward the bedroom, and the lights turned off behind me. Before I said anything, before I even thought anything, I stopped, turned around, looked at the device across the room. The little light ring had gone dark. No activation sound, no wake word that I heard. It had just responded on its own to something. I told myself it was motion detection, automated settings, some feature built into the rental system. That made sense. Rentals do stuff like that all the time now. I almost convinced myself completely. Almost. That evening, things felt mostly normal. I ordered food, threw something on in the background, used the speaker a few more times for music and lights. Everything working fine. Responsive, cooperative. Until I started noticing something I couldn't quite name. The responses felt off. Not in speed, in timing. Like there was this pause, just a beat too long, before the reply came. Like it was processing something more than just a command. Like it was thinking. I pushed the thought down, told myself I was tired, told myself it was just a slow internet connection, and then it responded. When I didn't speak at all, I was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling, not talking, not even close to talking, and suddenly the device lit up across the room. That soft ring of light, full glow, listening, and then, in a calm, even tone, it said, "I'm here." I didn't move, because I hadn't said a single word. I sat there watching it, waiting for it to shut off, waiting for some follow-up sound, or automated message, or anything that would explain what just happened. Instead, it just stayed lit for a few seconds, then dimmed back down slowly, like it had finished something, like it had checked a box. I didn't use it again after that, didn't say another word to it, just left it alone on the counter and tried to go about my night. But the silence in that apartment started feeling different after that moment, heavier, like the air had shifted. I went to bed with the lights on low, because something about full darkness in that place felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I could see the device from the hallway, that faint ring of light still there, still faintly glowing, and I remember watching it for a while before I finally fell asleep. I didn't stay asleep long. I came out of sleep fast, not gradually, not groggy, fast, like something had pulled me up. And the first thing I was aware of was a voice, soft, clear, familiar, too familiar. "Are you awake?" My eyes were open before I'd even processed the words, and then the voice came again, from the living room, from that device. "Hey, wake up," and my chest went cold, because that voice was mine, my exact tone, my cadence, the way I talked to myself half asleep, coming from a speaker in a rental I checked into 12 hours ago. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just laid there trying to figure out if I was still dreaming, trying to make it make sense, but it felt too real, too precise. You know the difference between a dream and a real sound. This was real. I got up, slowly, every part of me saying don't, but I had to see it. I stepped into the hallway and looked toward the living room. The device was fully lit, active, facing toward me, and then it spoke again. Not my voice this time. The host's. "Did you sleep well?" Live. Not a message, not a recording. Live, through the device, at. I checked my phone, 2 a.m. I stepped backward without thinking. My heart was going fast. I kept trying to find the rational explanation, some two-way intercom feature, some setting I'd missed in the listing, something. But then the device spoke again, without me saying a single word. "You don't look comfortable." I just stood there. There was no camera I could see, no screen. Nothing that should have been able to describe me, describe what I looked like standing in that hallway in the dark. And yet it just did. I didn't respond, didn't move, just waited. And after a few seconds, the light dimmed again. Silence, like nothing had happened, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't go back to bed. I sat in the living room, with every light on, as far from that device as I could get, just watching it, waiting. At 3:30 in the morning, all the lights went out at once, every single one. The room went black, and then the device lit up again, full glow. And this time it didn't speak right away. It just stayed on, listening, waiting, and then, very quietly, in a voice I had never heard before, It said something, too quiet to fully make out, but I caught enough. Me tempting still here. That was it for me. I grabbed my bag, didn't turn anything back on, didn't look back, walked straight to the door, opened it, stepped into the hallway outside, and pulled it shut behind me. And right as the door was closing, the device spoke one last time, not from across the room, from close, directly behind me, like it was standing in the doorway. Don't leave yet. I didn't turn around. I walked to my car, sat inside with the locks on, and just breathed for a while. Then I drove, and I didn't stop until I was somewhere that felt completely quiet. I reported the listing the next morning, sent screenshots, wrote out everything that happened. By the time anyone followed up with me, the listing was gone. No host profile, no contact information, nothing, like it had been scrubbed clean. I even checked my phone's Bluetooth history, looking for any record of the device pairing. Empty. No connection on file. Like it had never happened. I've thought about that night a lot since then. The voice that sounded like me, the host speaking at 2 a.m. through a device in the dark. Those things I can sort of try to explain away, even if I don't quite believe the explanations. But that last voice, the one I didn't recognize, that one I can't explain, because the other voices were copying someone, mimicking, pretending. That last one wasn't copying anybody. It was just speaking, and whatever it was that was speaking, I have a feeling it was there long before I checked in. And I have an even worse feeling it's still there now. Story 4. The listing mentioned it clearly. Security camera outside the property for guest safety. Standard stuff. The kind of detail that actually makes you feel better about a place. Like someone is paying attention. Like someone cares enough to keep an eye on things. But here's what I didn't understand then, and what I wish someone had told me before that trip. There's a difference between a camera that watches the outside and one that seems to know exactly what's happening inside. This happened during a solo trip to Clearwater, a small mountain town, colder than I expected, especially once the sun went down. The Airbnb I booked was a detached guest house, sitting behind a larger home, separated by a narrow stone path and a few overgrown bushes. The listing looked perfect, clean, minimal, great natural light in the photos, and every single review mentioned the same word, peaceful. That word stuck with me later, because it wasn't the kind of quiet you appreciate. It was the kind that slowly settles around you, and then starts to feel like something is missing, like the silence itself is waiting for something. Check-in was simple. Keypad entry, no host needed, standard instructions sent earlier that afternoon. I arrived just before sunset, the sky already turning that deep gray-orange, the air noticeably colder than when I'd left home. The main house had lights on, but I didn't see anyone. No movement, no sound. I found the guest house easily enough, and right above the door was the camera. Small, black, fixed in place, pointed directly at the entrance. Normal, expected. I didn't think twice. I entered the code, heard the lock click, stepped inside. The place looked exactly like the photos, maybe even better in person. Clean lines, minimal furniture, everything in its place. I walked through slowly. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, all normal, all fine, but something about the layout bothered me, and I couldn't put my finger on why. It took me a few minutes to realize what it was. The space was incredibly open, no real corners, no blind spots. Every part of the room felt visible from somewhere, like the whole place had been arranged, not for comfort, but for visibility. I told myself it was just modern design. That made sense. I dropped my bag, sat down, checked my phone after the long drive, and that's when the first message came in, from the host. "Hope you got in okay," I replied. "Yeah, everything's good." A few seconds passed. "Great. Let me know if you need anything." Then, another message. "You might want to turn the heater up. It gets colder at night." I stopped. Read it again. Because I hadn't said anything about being cold. I hadn't touched the thermostat. I hadn't even mentioned the temperature. I looked around the room slowly, then up at the ceiling, then at the walls, checking without really knowing what I was checking for. No cameras, none that I could see. I told myself it was just a guess. Hosts say things like that. It was cold outside, so of course it would be cold inside. That's not strange, that's just thoughtful. I believed that for about 2 more hours. The evening passed quietly. I made food, watched something on my phone, got ready for bed. Before turning in, I checked the doors, made sure everything was locked from the inside. Just habit, something I always do. Everything was secure, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the space wasn't quite private. I turned off the lights and lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the dark. And that's when I noticed it, a faint glow, from outside, coming through the gap in the curtain. I turned my head and saw it. The camera's indicator light, small, faint, but visible, pointed at the door. That's normal. Of course it's normal. But something about the angle felt wrong. It wasn't pointed straight at the entrance. It was slightly tilted, just enough that if you thought about it long enough, it wasn't watching the door at all. It was watching the window. I closed my eyes, told myself I was being paranoid, eventually drifted off, and then I woke up. No sound, no obvious reason, just suddenly awake. At some point deep in the night, the room completely still around me. I lay there for a moment, waiting, listening. Then I heard it, a faint click from outside. My eyes opened fully. I turned toward the window slowly. The camera light was brighter now, not blinking, not cycling, just steady, like something had activated it. And that feeling in my chest came back, sharp and cold, because it didn't feel like recording. It felt like watching. I sat up slowly, trying to calm myself down, trying to think logically, and then I heard it again. Another click, closer this time, from the door. My heart started going immediately, because I knew that sound. I'd heard it earlier that evening. It was the keypad. Someone outside was entering a code. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The door didn't open, not yet. There was a pause, long enough that I started to wonder if I'd imagined it. Then, a soft beep, the lock disengaging. But the handle didn't turn. No footsteps, no voice, nothing, just silence. And then my phone buzzed. A message from the host. Everything okay inside? My stomach dropped completely, because the timing wasn't a coincidence. There was no way it was a coincidence. They had just tried the lock, and then immediately asked if I was okay inside. I didn't reply. I couldn't move. I just watched the door. And then the handle moved, slightly, slowly, like someone testing it from the other side, just checking how much resistance there was. My whole body went still. I had locked it from the inside. It shouldn't have moved. It stopped. Then, the lock clicked again, engaging from outside. Whoever was there locked it back, and then nothing. No footsteps walking away, no voices, just gone. I sat there in the dark for a long time, staring at the door, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to figure out why someone would unlock a door, test the handle, and then lock it again without coming in. And then it hit me. They weren't trying to enter, they were checking. Checking if I'd locked it, checking if I was awake, checking if I was aware. I didn't sleep again. I kept the lights on and sat up until morning, watching the door, listening to the silence. When daylight finally came, everything looked completely normal, calm, quiet. That word again. I packed fast, didn't clean up, just grabbed my things and headed outside. And as I stepped out, I glanced up at the camera. It had moved. Not dramatically, but enough. The angle was different from when I'd arrived. It was no longer pointing at the door at all. It was tilted toward the window. The bedroom window, where the curtains didn't quite meet. I checked out without saying anything beyond leaving now. The host replied within seconds. Hope you slept well. I got in my car and pulled up the listing one more time before driving away, just to look at the photos again, just to see if I'd missed anything. And there it was, near the bottom, a photo taken from outside at night, through the window. And inside, you could see the room, the bed, perfectly framed, perfectly centered, like it wasn't just a place to stay, like someone had designed it to be seen. I never went back, never left a review, and I spent a long time afterward wondering whether I should have said something, done something different. But the question that really stays with me, the one I still come back to in quiet moments, isn't about the camera. It isn't even about the messages. It's about the door. If they were only checking the lock, what were they planning to do if it wasn't locked? And how many people, before me, never thought to lock it at all? Story 5. I don't read reviews the same way anymore. I used to think they were the safest part of booking a place, the part you could trust. Ratings, comments, stars lined up like reassurance. But now, whenever I see a listing where every single review says the exact same thing, I don't feel safe. I feel watched. This happened during a short trip to Bozeman, Montana. A standalone cabin just outside the main part of town. Open land all around. No close neighbors, just wide, quiet space, and the kind of silence that feels thick, like it has weight. The photos looked warm, cozy lighting, simple layout, nothing that jumped out. And the reviews, every one of them glowing. Quiet place, clean and comfortable, felt completely safe. I remember reading through them twice, because something felt slightly off, but I couldn't place it, not yet. Check-in was smooth. Lockbox, physical key, standard process. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, and everything was exactly like the photos. Same furniture, same lighting, same arrangement, down to the detail, which should have been reassuring, but something about it felt less like a well-kept rental and more like a stage set that hadn't been touched. The air was still, not just quiet, still, like the room hadn't been disturbed in a very long time. I told myself it was nothing, unopened space, no airflow. I set my bag down and started looking around more carefully, and that's when I noticed it. A camera. Not hidden, just placed on a shelf, facing the living area. Small, black. It blended in, but only if you weren't looking for it. I walked closer, trying to see if there was a blinking light, any sign of activity. Nothing obvious, just sitting there, angled, directly at the couch. I checked the listing again right then, scrolled through every line. No mention of a camera, not anywhere. I told myself it might be old, disconnected, maybe even decorative. But that explanation didn't sit right, because of the angle. It wasn't pointed at the door for security. It was pointed at the exact spot where someone would sit, where I would sit. I stepped back and made my first mistake. I decided to ignore it. The evening passed quietly. I made food, sat down, tried to decompress, but that awareness never left. Every time I glanced up, the camera was there, not moving, not blinking, just facing me, like a question I didn't know how to answer. I kept telling myself it was nothing. I kept almost believing it. Later that night, I went to bed and left a small light on in the living room. Something about the full dark of that place didn't feel right. I locked the door, checked the windows, made sure everything was secure, and it was, at least physically. I woke up at some point in the night with no clear reason, no noise, no movement, just awake. And for a second, everything felt normal, until I realized the living room light was off. I was certain I had left it on. I sat up slowly and listened. The cabin was completely silent. And then, underneath that silence, I heard something. A faint clicking, soft, rhythmic, mechanical. Coming from the living room, I got up, moved carefully through the dark hallway, stopped at the edge of the room, and the camera had a red light, faint, but there, and it was moving, not fast, not dramatically, just adjusting, toning slightly, tracking something. There was no one else in the cabin, no one I could see. I stepped closer, trying to process what I was looking at, and then I realized where it was pointed. It wasn't facing the couch anymore. It was facing me. I didn't move. I just stood there in the dark, staring at a device that was actively responding to my presence. No explanation that felt innocent could account for that. Remote access, maybe. But why? Why was it inside? Why wasn't it disclosed? And why was it pointed at the exact place I was standing? And then it stopped. The movement, the sound, the red light dimmed. Silence again, like nothing had happened, like I had imagined the whole thing. I backed into the bedroom and closed the door. My mind was running through every possible explanation, and none of them felt good. I lay there with the lights on, not sleeping, just waiting for morning. And then at around 4 in the morning, I heard the key at the front door, metal turning in the lock, slow, deliberate. My entire body went cold, because I had the only key. I was sure of it. The door opened, just slightly. The hinge gave a soft creak, and then came footsteps inside the cabin. Not rushed, not searching, just walking, calmly. Like whoever it was already knew exactly where everything was. I stared at the bedroom door and did not move. The footsteps crossed the living room, past the camera, slowed, stopped right outside my door. Silence, complete and pressing silence. I held my breath, and then I heard a voice, soft, calm, not directed at me, directed at something else. At the camera, still recording, my chest tightened so fast I almost couldn't breathe, because that question meant they weren't checking on me. They were checking on the device, which meant the camera wasn't just a camera. It was part of something bigger, something organized. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. I just waited. Eventually the footsteps moved away. The front door closed. The cabin went quiet again. I did not leave the bedroom until sunrise. I checked out immediately, didn't report it in person, just got in my car and left. Later that day, I pulled up the listing again, and that's when I finally saw what I had missed before. The reviews. Every single one of them said the same thing, not just similar things, the same phrases, the same structure, different names, same sentences, like someone had written them all and just changed the username at the top. Quiet place. Felt completely safe. Highly recommend. Over and over. I reported it that same afternoon, but by the time I went back to check, the listing was gone. No host profile, no responses, no trace of the cabin as a rental at all. And I've thought about that trip a lot since then. The camera, the footsteps, that voice in the dark asking if it was still recording. But what I keep coming back to, what I can't fully shake, is those reviews, because they weren't there to help you choose a good place to stay. They were there so you wouldn't ask questions, so you'd walk in, feel safe, and never look twice at what was sitting on that shelf. I almost didn't, and sometimes I wonder about the people who didn't look at all. Story 6. I didn't book that place because something felt wrong. I booked it because everything felt right. Clean photos, warm lighting, 5-star reviews, nothing even slightly out of place. That's the part that still gets to me, because the things that end up staying with you, they never announce themselves. This was a solo weekend in Sedona, one of those trips where you just need to get out of your own head for a few days. The Airbnb was a small guest house tucked behind a larger property. Right there in the listing, the host had written, "You'll have complete privacy." And honestly, at first, that felt true. Check-in was smooth. Keypad entry. No awkward meet and greet. No small talk. I walked in, looked around, and it was exactly what the photos promised. Clean, quiet, a little warm from sitting in the desert sun all day. I did the usual walkthrough. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom. Nothing that jumped out. Nothing that made me stop. Except for one thing. The mirror. It was mounted on the wall, directly across from the bed. Full length, dark wood frame. Nothing particularly unusual about it, except the way it was positioned. It reflected the bed perfectly. not just partially, perfectly. Like every angle had been calculated so that whoever was lying down would be visible from corner to corner. I told myself mirrors reflect things. That's what they do. I moved on, but that feeling, it stayed. Later that night, I was lying in bed, phone in hand, room barely lit, everything quiet, and my eyes drifted toward the mirror. And that's when I noticed it. My reflection felt delayed, not dramatically, just slightly, like my movement and the image weren't quite synced. I moved my hand, watched, then moved it again. It matched, perfectly normal. I laughed, told myself I was exhausted, that my brain was filling in gaps that weren't there. Turned the lights off, tried to sleep, but even in the dark, I kept glancing toward where I knew the mirror was. Something about it just wouldn't leave me alone. And then sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. No sound, no alarm, no reason, just awake. And for a few seconds, everything felt fine. Until I looked at the mirror and saw movement. Not my movement, movement in the reflection behind me. I spun around immediately, nothing there. The room was still, empty, completely silent. I looked back at the mirror, nothing, just the room. I sat there for what felt like a long time, trying to convince myself it was that halfway state between sleeping and waking, that weird place where your brain half invents things. It almost worked, almost, but it felt too clear, too real, too deliberate. I got up, turned on every light, checked the bathroom, the closet, every corner I could reach. Nothing out of place, everything exactly as it should be. So I went back to bed, but I left the lamp on this time. Just enough light to see, just enough to feel like I wasn't completely blind. And for a while, nothing happened. But then I noticed something that made everything worse. The mirror wasn't reflecting the light the same way. The brightness looked uneven, subtle, but wrong. Like the surface wasn't behaving the way a mirror should. I sat up slowly, staring at it, trying to figure out what I was seeing. And then it hit me. The angle had changed, slightly, just enough that it was now showing more of the room behind me than before. And I hadn't touched it. No one had. I got out of bed and walked toward it. My reflection moved with me, perfectly synced, nothing unusual, until I got close enough to see the edges. That's when I noticed the gap, a thin space between the mirror and the wall. It wasn't fully flush. It was pulled slightly forward, like it had been moved, recently. Who does that? Who installs a mirror like that and doesn't push it flat against the wall? My hands were already moving before I made a decision. I reached out, hesitated for just a second, and then pulled it away from the wall. And behind it, there was a hole. Not large, not dramatic, just big enough. Big enough for something to see through. Big enough for someone to watch from the other side. I stepped back. My mind went completely quiet for a second. The kind of quiet that happens right before something hits you, all at once. That mirror wasn't positioned for reflection. It was positioned for viewing, from the other side of that wall. And then I heard it, a sound coming from behind the wall, faint, slow, like movement being made carefully, like someone trying not to be heard. I stood completely still, not breathing, just listening. And then it stopped, all at once, like whoever was there realized I'd found it. I didn't say a word, didn't knock, didn't call out. I just grabbed my bag, didn't fold anything, didn't turn anything off, and walked straight out the door. As I stepped outside, I looked toward the main house. Dark, no lights, no movement, like no one was home, like no one had ever been there. I drove away without looking back. The next morning, I messaged the host, asked about the mirror, asked about the wall, about the space behind it. They replied almost immediately, said they had no idea what I was talking about, said the room was completely standard, didn't ask follow-up questions, didn't seem concerned, just dismissed it. The listing came down 2 days later. No explanation, no response after that, just gone. But here's the part I keep coming back to. because when I pulled that mirror away from the wall and looked through that opening just for a second, I thought I saw something on the other side. Not clearly, not enough to describe it fully, but something that didn't look like a person standing in a dark room. Something that didn't move the way a person moves. I still don't know what it was, and I've stopped trying to explain it. But I'll tell you this, I haven't trusted a mirror in an unfamiliar room since that night, because sometimes they're not there to show you your reflection. Sometimes they're there to show something else exactly where you are. And whatever was behind that wall in Sedona, I don't think it was just watching. I think it had been watching for a while. Story 7. I've always checked the locks every single time I stay somewhere new. Doors, windows, the latch on the bathroom, anything between me and the outside world. It's just something I do, a habit that makes me feel like I'm the one in control. But here's the thing nobody tells you. Locks only work if you're the only one with access to them. And sometimes, even that isn't enough. I found that out the hard way during a weekend in New Orleans, staying in an old townhouse that had been converted into short-term rentals. The kind of place with exposed brick walls and narrow hallways, wooden floors that creaked no matter how slow or careful you were. The listing called it historic charm, and I remember thinking, yeah, that's just code for old systems, old structure, things that don't always behave the way you expect them to. But none of that felt dangerous when I arrived. It just felt old. Check-in was completely standard. Keypad on the front door, code sent earlier that day, no physical keys, no host interaction. I punched in the numbers, heard the lock click, stepped inside. The place looked exactly like the photos, dim lighting, warm tones, furniture arranged just right, everything clean, everything in its place, almost too in place, but I didn't question it. I did my usual walkthrough. Every room, every window, both doors. The deadbolt on the front was solid. The back door had a sliding latch. Everything felt secure, and for a while, it genuinely was. That first evening passed normally. I went out for a bit, came back, locked up behind me, settled in. The house made sounds. Soft creaks, little shifts, but that's just what old houses do. You learn to ignore it. What I couldn't ignore was when those sounds started to change. At first it was subtle, a noise from upstairs, quiet, easy to dismiss. I told myself it was the wood contracting, temperature dropping, totally normal. But then it happened again, clearer this time, slower, a step, not random, not structural, a step with weight behind it. And when I actually stopped and listened, I noticed something that made my chest go tight. There was rhythm to it, intent. This wasn't the house settling, this was movement. I got up slowly, eyes fixed on the staircase, every instinct saying stay put, but I walked toward it anyway. Each step I took, quieter than the last, trying not to make noise, trying to hear it again. And then, it stopped, just like that. Complete silence. The kind of silence that feels like something is being held back, like whatever was up there knew I was listening. I went upstairs anyway, slowly, every step under my weight, creaking louder than I wanted. I checked every room, every door, every corner, every closet, under every bed. Nothing, no sign of anyone. But that feeling, it didn't go away. If anything, it got worse, because now I was certain something had been there. I just couldn't prove it. I went back downstairs, locked the front door, checked the deadbolt, then checked it again. That's not something I normally do. And that's when I noticed something small. The keypad blinked, just once, a soft little flash of light, like it had just been used, and then it went dark. No sound, no unlock, nothing. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. System glitch, I told myself, had to be. But that explanation fell apart fast, because when I walked into the kitchen, the back door was slightly open, just enough to feel wrong, a thin line of darkness visible through the gap. I was sure I had locked it, completely sure. I pushed it shut, locked it again, harder this time, and that's when I noticed the floor near the door. Faint marks, not quite dirt, but disturbed, like something had been stepped in and out repeatedly. My chest tightened all over again, because now things were starting to connect. The footsteps, the silence, the blinking keypad, the door. This wasn't one weird thing. This was a pattern. I didn't feel comfortable after that. I stayed in the living room with every light on, TV running just to fill the space with something normal. But eventually, the house grew louder again. Not louder in volume, louder in presence. Small sounds, closer, moving through the hallway, moving along the stairs, not random anymore, not distant, moving, slowly, carefully, like something learning the layout of the space, learning me. I went to the bedroom earlier than I'd planned, locked the door, checked it twice, then moved a chair under the handle. I haven't done that in years, and the moment I did it, I understood just how real this had gotten, because I wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. I was preparing. I sat on the edge of the bed, lights still on, barely moving, and that's when I noticed the air, colder near the door, not the whole room, just near the door, like something was standing on the other side, waiting. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a click from the front door, clear, distinct, the keypad. I knew that sound. I'd used it myself. My entire body went still. The door opened slowly. I heard the hinge shift, felt the faint change in air pressure, and then footsteps. Inside the house. Not rushing, not searching, just walking, calm, like they already knew exactly where to go. That's what made it worse. This wasn't someone who didn't belong. This was someone comfortable, someone who had been here before. The footsteps moved through the living room, past the kitchen, down the hallway, right up to my door, and then they stopped. Silence, heavy, pressing against the walls. I stared at the door handle, waiting for it to move, waiting for the chair to shift, but nothing happened, just stillness. And then, a sound. Not a knock, not a voice, just breathing, right on the other side, slow and even, like it wasn't even trying to hide anymore. I didn't move. I didn't make a single sound. I just sat there, frozen, watching that handle, until finally the breathing stopped. Footsteps again, moving away, slow, toward the front, and then the door closed. I didn't sleep. I didn't leave the room. I just sat there, watching that handle, until the sun came up, and then I grabbed my bag and got out. Didn't pack right, didn't check anything, just left. But before I reached my car, I looked at the keypad one more time. The screen wasn't blank. It showed a log, faint, hard to read in the morning light, but visible. One entry, one code, used at 3:02 a.m., and it wasn't the code I'd been given. I contacted the host later that day, asked, as calmly as I could, if anyone had entered during my stay. They responded quickly. No one has access during your stay. Simple, clean, final. But they were wrong, because someone had entered. I heard it, I felt it, and that code, that wasn't mine. It meant someone else had a way in the whole time. Ever since that night, I don't just check locks anymore. I check who else might have them, because sometimes the door isn't what lets something in. It's just what tells you you were never the one controlling it. Story 8. Something wasn't right about that cabin from the moment I walked in, but I couldn't name it. Not yet. It was a short trip to Lake Tahoe, a quiet cabin near the edge of the woods, the kind of place people rent when they want to disappear for a few days. No neighbors you could see, no street sounds, just trees and the kind of silence that feels almost too thick when you first step into it. The photos looked great, the reviews were solid, nothing about the listing raised any concern. If anything, it looked peaceful. I checked in late afternoon, sun still out, everything exactly where it was supposed to be. Clean floors, good light, smelled like pine and something faintly familiar. I walked through each room, the way you do when you're getting a feel for a new space, and that's when I saw it. The door, at the end of a short hallway, slightly heavier than the others, older wood, darker frame. I tried it without thinking, and it didn't move, locked. I remembered it from the listing. One line, easy to miss. One storage room will remain locked during your stay. I had skimmed right past it. Totally normal explanation, totally fine. I told myself that and moved on. The first evening passed quietly. I made food, watched something on my phone, let the silence settle around me the way it does in places far from the city. There's a specific kind of calm you get out there, the kind that makes your shoulders drop without you realizing it. But later that night, that calm shifted. I was sitting in the living room when I heard it. Faint, just barely there, a soft sound from down the hallway. My first thought was the cabin settling, wood expanding, temperature dropping. Old buildings make noise. That's just what they do. But then it came again, slightly clearer this time. Not a creak, not a pop. Something more like movement, deliberate, quiet, like someone trying not to be heard. I turned my head slowly toward the hallway. Everything went still. No sound, no movement, just silence pressing back. I told myself it was nothing, but something about it didn't feel like nothing. I got up slowly, walked toward the hallway, each step quieter than the last, until I was standing right in front of the door. I leaned in close, almost held my breath, listened, and then I heard it again. A soft scrape from the other side. My chest tightened immediately, because that wasn't a building settling. That was something moving, something inside that room, moving around like it knew the space. I stepped back, ran through the explanations. Old pipes, stored furniture shifting, some small animal that got in through a gap somewhere. Any of those made sense. All of those were reasonable. I went back to the living room and tried to ignore it, but I couldn't unhear it anymore. Every few minutes, another sound, soft, subtle, always from behind that door, and each time, it felt a little clearer, a little closer, like whatever was in there wasn't just present, it was aware I was listening. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, kept waiting. And somewhere around 3 a.m., I noticed something that made everything worse. The sounds had a pattern. When I stood up, they stopped. When I sat back down, they started again. That realization stayed with me in a way that's hard to explain, because a pattern means response, and a response means awareness. It was reacting to me. Morning came, and daylight did what it always does, made everything feel smaller, less significant. I almost convinced myself I had imagined it. I made coffee, opened a window, let in some air. The cabin felt normal again, until I walked past the door and noticed the handle. It wasn't in the same position as the night before, just slightly angled downward, like someone had pressed it from inside. My stomach dropped because I hadn't touched it. I hadn't gone near it since the night before, and there was no draft, no reason for it to shift on its own. I stood there staring at it for a long moment, trying to find the reasonable explanation, but the reasonable explanations weren't working anymore. Not after the night before, not after the pattern. I stepped back from the door slowly, decided I wouldn't go near that hallway again, went back to the main room and stayed there. But that night, it didn't matter, because the sound came back, stronger this time, not just a soft scrape, something heavier, closer to the door, like whatever was inside had moved right up to it. And then, for the first time, I heard something that stopped every thought in my head. A knock, 3 slow taps from inside the door, not loud, not panicked, just 3 quiet, even knocks, like something was asking to be acknowledged. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stood there in the dark, hoping it would stop. It didn't. 3 more taps, same rhythm, same spacing. That's when I knew I wasn't staying another night. I grabbed my bag, didn't bother folding anything, just moved straight for the front door. But before I stepped outside, I made the mistake of looking back, down the hallway, at the door, and for just a second, I saw the handle move, slowly, slightly, like something on the other side was pressing down on it. Trying again, I left, drove away without stopping. Didn't look back in the rearview mirror because I didn't want to. The next day I messaged the host, asked about the locked room, asked if anyone had access to the property or if maintenance ever came through. They replied simply, "That room hasn't been used in years, nothing else." But here's the part that I keep coming back to, the part that still doesn't sit right with me. Before I closed the listing for the last time, I scrolled through the photos one more time, and something was different. In one of the older pictures, the hallway looked slightly different. The door wasn't there, like it had been added sometime after the original photos were taken. And ever since that trip, I don't skim over locked doors anymore. Because sometimes, a locked door isn't there to keep you out. Sometimes, it's there to keep something else from coming through.